RPG speedruns are arguably some of the most difficult to handle, with luck-based scenarios popping up around every corner. EarthBound is no exception to this, but it can be avoided by doing incredibly precise glitches to skip most of the game. But what happens when you take those glitches away? The result is an intricate speedrun that requires deep knowledge of game mechanics, quick decision-making skills, and a whole lot of burgers. We're going to talk about what it takes to bring down this juggernaut of a game, with the history of EarthBound glitchless world records. The EarthBound speedrunning scene didn't start off as early as others may have, with some of the first conversations being in late 2005 on the SDA forums. SDA, or Speed Demos Archive, was the place to find many recordings of speedruns that would be judged by verification staff and published if approved. Typically, these publications were the best of the best at the time. The forum conversations would have people talking about wanting to get into the game with a segmented run, but not having the time to do so. For most speedruns that are shorter, it's easy to complete them in one sitting, which is called single segment. For longer runs, people would opt to do them over time, which is called segmented. This was common practice during the early days of speedrunning RPGs. In this case, the earliest segmented run completed was by Evil Ninja in June of 2006. While there's no video footage of this run, he mentioned that he finished with a time of 7 hours and 16 minutes. He would proceed to lower his time throughout the month until he had claimed a time of 5 hours and 42 minutes. He had recorded this in 40 segments on VHS and was ready to send it into SDA to have the tapes converted. The entire community in the thread was excited that they would finally have a run to watch on the website, posting their support for Evil Ninja during the submission process. Evil Ninja was so excited, he even started talking about doing runs single segment after the submission, which would be a first for EarthBound speedrunning. November 5th, 2006 arrives, and users log into SDA early that morning, and they're met with sheer terror. Rejected. After months of waiting and believing that the run was of high enough caliber to be published on SDA, the verification staff rejected the run. In January of 2007, Mike Uyama would post that the verifiers believed the run had too many little mistakes and could not be published because of it. Fortunately, one of the people who converted the tapes, Nate, uploaded them to his website for others to review. Though the video is not available today, this was the first time an EarthBound glitchless speedrun was uploaded online for others to watch. The goal of the game is to defeat the evil cosmic destroyer, Gygus. You must travel across the land to sanctuaries and collect 8 melodies for your soundstone key item you get from BuzzBuzz. The mechanics of the game are mostly typical for a 90s JRPG. Turn-based battles, money, equipment, consumable items, and levels. What makes this game different from most others are two things. Most enemies can be seen in the overworld, so encounters can somewhat be controlled by the player. Next, when taking damage in battle, your HP scrolls down over time. Not only that, you can act while this is happening. If you end a battle before your HP hits 0, you can survive the battle with 1 HP. As for routing this massive game, we'll be talking about that later. After his run was rejected, Evil Ninja departed SDA's EarthBound seed for good, but not without inspiring other runners in the thread to improve upon his route, one of them being Mickey Mage, who would go on to be a prominent EarthBound any percent runner in the future. However, no new segmented glitchless runs would come out of SDA, as many of the community members in the thread would become busy with school and other projects. Even though SDA was the main site where runners would come together and post their strategies and times, there was another site where top runners would showcase their skills. Twin Galaxies. Back in the day, Twin Galaxies not only hosted high scores of famous arcade games, but they also accepted single-segment speedruns for verification, with new records being announced every so often via posts by legendary speedrunning pioneer Tom Vadava. If you watched any videos from a certain famous table seasoning, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. EarthBound was beaten in a single sitting in 11 hours, 24 minutes, and 50 seconds by a runner named Chris Corsi on September 17, 2008. While the previously mentioned segmented run was much faster, this is the first time someone has beaten it in a single sitting, so we'll only reference single segment runs from now on. The videos for the early days of Twin Galaxies do not exist, unfortunately, as the runs were verified by site referees who typically could not convert the videos to be posted on the site. Back in the late 2000s, posting hours of footage in a single video just wasn't that common. The record was traded back and forth between Chris and another runner named Mark Murcia, until in July of 2010, Chris Corsi obtains a time of 6 hours, 38 minutes, and 16 seconds. While there's still no video for this run, we do have screenshots of a stopwatch and his notes with a verification on Twin Galaxies. Many people were excited about this accomplishment and showed their support in the comments for the article that was written about the run, including this guy, who claimed to have beaten it on emulator in 6 hours and 8 minutes. Meet Skateman222, a runner who's been doing work on his own for almost a year at that point. Fast forward to 2012, and people started taking notice of this back on the SDA forums, with Mickey Mage finishing up his AGDQ 2012 run of EarthBound 80%. He wanted to finally learn the full game, and someone suggested to check out Skateman's streams on Justin TV, saying that he had a 5 hour and 37 minute single segment glitchless run. Not even 2 days later, Skateman was brought to the EarthBound thread and shared his route strategies with other runners. We haven't talked much about the route due to the lack of video footage, but after Skateman's PBs throughout 2012, his world record highlight was saved to his channel. Let's take a look at how he accomplished this. Be sure to sit back because this is going to be a long one. The night O-Net section is pretty cut and dry for the most part. He gets his equipment and tries to avoid enemies on the outside to start the Starman Jr. fight as fast as possible. Once that's done, he starts the O-Net daytime sequence and gears up at the shops in the city. After getting everything he needs, Skateman takes on the Frank and Frankenstein boss, beating them and getting access to Mayor Perkle's key to the shack. This lets him access the first dungeon, Giant Step. Here he grinds to level 8 on attack slugs to get the PSI ability Rockin' Alpha, which does anywhere from 40 to 120 damage to all enemies. Skate gets to the top of Giant Step and takes on Titanic Ant and his 2 Antoids with the new ability. Titanic Ant is incredibly punishing with his attacks and can easily damage Ness for over half his health in a single turn. After Skateman defeats the boss, he then gets the first sound for his Soundstone. Skate then heads back into O-Net and takes on the Cop boss rush. He defeats Captain Strong and he heads out to the Exit Mouse house right outside of O-Net and grabs one of those. Exit mice can be used while in a dungeon, and they return the player to the entry point. As you would expect, this saves a lot of time over walking back to the beginning of a dungeon. Making his way into Tucson, he gets the bike from the bike shop and saves in the department store. From there, he heads into Berglund Park to get some equipment and 5 fresh eggs. Fresh eggs can hatch into chicks, and they grow into chickens. Chickens can be sold for $110, so they make for good money in the early game. Skateman then goes to Apple Kid's house to get the receiver phone and enters Peaceful Rest Valley to load in the iron pencil blocking his path. This activates a cutscene when going back into Tucson, and he goes back to get the pencil eraser from Apple Kid. Skateman finally makes his way through Peaceful Rest Valley to the Happy Happy Village. In Happy Happy, he goes to the shop to sell his chickens and acquire some new equipment. After taking the required visit to Paula in the shack and getting the Franklin badge, he heads to the Cultist HQ to take on Carpainter. Carpainter has 2 cycles of attacks, one at which he does 2 lightnings, life up, and a physical attack. The other he does 2 lightnings, PSI Shield Alpha, and a physical attack. After defeating him, Skate goes back to grab Paula from the cabin, who will be the first extra party member that he attains. Paula basically ends up being the glass cannon with the low HP stat and a high PP amount, along with powerful elemental PSI attacks. From there, he goes to the shop to stock up on items, including skip sandwiches. Skip sandwiches not only restore health, but also give you an effect that doubles your speed for 10 seconds. There's also a deluxe version that can be found later on that doubles your speed for 20 seconds. After getting items and equipment, Skate goes into Little Putt Steps to fight Monomole. At this point, Ness needs to be level 14 to know the Paralysis ability. Paralysis makes it to where a character can't use attacks or items, and can only use PSI abilities. Monomole has devastating physical attacks, but no offensive PSI abilities, so this makes the fight pretty easy to complete. After defeating Monomole, Skate gets the sound from Little Putt and returns to the cave to fight a bear to do something called a Death Warp. Remember the save Skateman did earlier in the Tucson department store? Well, he never saved after, and there were no events to override the position he would end up if he was defeated and resumed. When the party is defeated in EarthBound, you lose half of your money, and you end up where the game last saved your position via event trigger. So Skateman used this to skip walking all the way back through Happy Happy and Peaceful Rest Valley, saving minutes. When you resume the game, all of the party members except Ness stay dead, and Ness starts with 0 PP. So Skateman withdraws more money from the ATM, then heads to the hospital to revive Paula. With Paula brought back to life, Skate talked to the Runway 5 brothers to get the backstage pass, and he could talk to her father at Polestar for the story trigger, as well as talk to Everdread for the wad of cash. This also was a way to skip the Everdread boss fight entirely, since his state was updated from when we first got Paula into the party. Skate completes the Chaos Theater scene and heads to Threed via the Runaway 5 bus. Getting off the bus, Skate activates the zombie trigger in the graveyard and gets lured into a trap by a classy-looking woman, starting the winter sequence. Here, Skate gets control of Jeff, our third party member. Leaving the boarding school, Skate gets the Bubble Monkey and crosses Lake Tess to enter the Brick Road dungeon, which is pretty dangerous for a low-level Jeff. The first enemy specifically, the worthless protoplasm, is incredibly fast and strong compared to Jeff right now. So much faster that you start with a -% chance to run on the first turn. This is due to how the game calculates your run chance, which is your highest speed minus the enemy speed plus 10 times the turn number %. In this example, the protoplasm speed is 27. Jeff's at this point is about 3. So that means that Skate has a -14% chance to run on the first turn, and is unable to escape until at least turn 3. Breaking through Brick Road in the Pawn Cave afterwards, Skate makes it back to Annette's lab to head back to Threed. After Jeff joins the team and they escape the prison, Skate fights the boogie tent near the bottom of Threed. This fight is the first time we see one of the game's most broken items, the bottle rocket. There's a few items and equipment that only Jeff can use, and the bottle rocket just so happens to be one of them. Bottle rockets have a property that bases their miss rate on the enemy speed against Jeff's speed. In this case, the chance to miss is 2 times the enemy speed minus Jeff's speed %. Not only that, but a bottle rocket can do anywhere between 90 and 150 damage. This by itself isn't powerful, but there's more than one kind of bottle rocket. Bottle rockets come in 3 types: regular bottle rockets, big bottle rockets, multi-bottle rockets. Bottle rockets apply the damage formula once, while big bottle rockets apply it 5 individual times, and multi-bottle rockets apply it 20 individual times. Keep this in mind for later, as they'll be really useful throughout the game. For now, Jeff comes equipped with 1 BBR already, and can be used to deal up to 750 damage to Boogie Tent if one is lucky enough, allowing to fight to typically be beaten in one phase, and that's what Skate does. After grabbing the fly honey and doing some shopping for more items and equipment, Skate activates the triggers needed to go into Threed Tunnel. Threed Tunnel is filled with enemies that will inflict debilitating status effects if the player is not careful, including a boss called Mini Barf that can easily waste a lot of time if you're not prepared. After beating the boss, he heads up to Grapefruit Falls to Saturn Valley. Saturn Valley has a required event trigger for the Grapefruit Falls waterfall to get into Belch's base. You talk to the Mr. Saturn and he tells you that the password is to wait 3 minutes. And unfortunately, there's no way to get around this. Skate heads back to Grapefruit Falls and does just that. Most runners like to say that this is their built-in bathroom break, as 3 minutes of real time must pass without any controller inputs happening. Belch's base has many groups of enemies that can overwhelm the runner at this point in the game, and since the corridors are tight, it's hard to avoid any encounters. Pushing his way through the base, Skate makes it to Master Belch. The fly honey that was picked up earlier becomes useful since that is required to complete the fight in the run, since Belch is scripted to not take damage until the honey is used. After the fight, Skate doesn't exit through the back door, and instead uses an exit mouse to escape from the front. It's not only faster to go out through the front, but he also wants to go back to Threed, completely skipping the Milky Well Sanctuary for now. As it turns out, the game is pretty open-ended as to how you complete some sanctuaries. This means that you can skip a sanctuary and come back to it later with more items and levels. With that out of the way, Skate gets on the bus in Threed, heading to Dusty Dunes and getting some equipment. Unfortunately, some of the recording for his run is corrupted during certain points, so we'll have to infer as to what he did based upon current route knowledge. Skate heads to the desert shack, picking up a couple items on the way, and talks to Gerardo, who is hungry and needs food to make the story progress. He then walks to Foreside and goes to the Tapala Theater to trigger the opening of Mole Cave. He heads back to Dusty Dunes and enters the massive cavern. This cave has many strong enemies that can one-shot almost every character in the party, along with being able to cause nasty status effects. Skate has to deal with this and 5 bosses who all claim to be the 3rd strongest of them. These bosses all have physical shields and can inflict a lot of damage to the party. After going through the cave, grabbing some progression items, and taking down all 5 moles, Skate uses an exit mouse to leave and talks to Gerardo again for story reasons. After meeting Gerardo's brother on the Rainbow Bridge to get the diamond, Skate heads back to the Tapala Theater to release the Runaway 5 from their contract and watches their last show. With all that out of the way, Skate heads to the department store and goes to the 2nd floor to stack up on super bombs and big bottle rockets. Super bombs deal anywhere from 135 to 405 damage, and like regular bombs, they can be used by any party member. After going back downstairs and triggering Paula's kidnapping, Skate goes to the top floor and fights the department store spook. The spook acts like a normal Mook enemy for the most part, alternating between offensive and healing PSI abilities. After defeating the spook, we head to Jackie's cafe to witness the death of Everdread and get access to Moonside. In Moonside, Skate goes through the required triggers, and on the way to getting the Invisible Man, he grabs the Night Pendant and the Secret Herb. The Night Pendant is an important equip item that allows the player to resist flash attacks, which is very useful in preventing status effects and instant death from them. When getting the Invisible Man, Skate also skips the cutscene trigger for the text boxes, but the game still gives him the ability to get past the NPC blocking his way to the boss. The Manny statue fight can go very wrong if it uses moves like Paralysis and Glorious Light. Luckily, Skate didn't have a hard time with that and took it down with ease. Escaping from the hallucination, Monkey tells the player to head to Monkey Cave to progress the story. Skate takes the bus back to Dusty Dunes, shops for some items, and heads into the cave. In Monkey Cave, there are NPCs that block your path to different rooms, and they require different items to get past them. Skate has been collecting all these items throughout the run up until this point via gift boxes and shops. He uses the items to get through the cave, grabbing an important item called the Bag of Dragonite, and talks to Talarama to continue the story. Bags of Dragonite are single-use items that deal massive fire damage to an enemy. These will end up being useful later on. After exiting Monkey Cave, Skate gets the teleport ability and grabs an exit mouse outside of Onette, and then heads back to Foreside to save Paula. He gives the machine to the Monotoli employee and makes his way up Monotoli Tower. This place features one of the first uses of Skip Sandwich Deluxes to dodge enemies and speed through rooms. The robot enemies here are quick in the overworld and dangerous to fight, wasting a lot of resources and time. Once at the end, Skate faces Clumsy Robot, a boss with a lot of speed and a PSI shield to boot. He makes quick work of him with super bombs and goes into the next room to get Paula back and progress the story. After a few cutscenes, Skate gets on the Runaway 5 bus outside to head back to Threed, and gets the Skyrunner fixed to fly to Andonut's lab in Winters. Once in Winters, he hits up Rainy Circle and takes on Shroom. Shroom is a boss that inflicts many status effects and is resistant to the Freeze PSI ability, making options mostly limited to physical and fire damage. Once Skate beats Shroom, he collects the sound from the Rainy Circle and starts off towards Summers. In Summers, he gets the phone number for the Stoic Club, buys a few Skip sandwiches in the shop nearby, and convinces a lady to sell him some magic cake for a fever dream about a kid in the Far East. Playing as Pooh for the first time in Dalam, Skate picks up a few items and gets possessed by an ancient spirit to awaken his inner powers. The King of Dalam sends Pooh off to meet with the rest of the party, and they head to the museum to fight some Shattermen and pick up the hieroglyphs. One of the more important things for this run is the money route. We haven't talked much about it, but for all the equipment and items that are bought, an excessive amount of money is spent on them. To allow for this, different items are picked up throughout the run and sold to keep up. This is a common practice in many RPG speedruns, and beating the Shattered Men in the museum gives Skate about a couple $1,000s a piece, for example. After completing the museum, Skate heads to the boat at the docks and sets sail for Scaraba. He runs into the Kraken, which is one of the tougher enemies in the game, with the devastating moveset that can wipe out the entire party in just a couple turns. Skate defeats the Kraken and continues into Scaraba. He hits up the shop for a couple crystal charms, which increases speed by 15 points. This is a big increase for Jeff since he still has a few big bottle rockets, and the enemies start to have higher stats that work against his ability to damage them. Skate makes his way to the pyramid and makes use of the skip sandwiches to speed through the dungeon, skipping some enemies and getting to the boss, Guardian General. Guardian General gets taken down by some big bottle rockets, and Skate hits the switch for the top floor. He drops down and grabs the Hawkeye, a diamond band, and makes his way out of the pyramid. Losing Pooh from the Star Master cutscene, he gets the key to the tower and makes his way into Dungeon Man. Dungeon Man and South Scaraba have many fast-moving enemies that can waste a lot of time if encountered, due to their high speed and resistances. Skateman works through Dungeon Man, as well as South Scaraba using more of the skip sandwiches he bought earlier, and gets into the Yellow Submarine. Taking the submarine to deep darkness, Skate fills up on multi-bottle rockets from the arms dealer and uses teleporting to avoid having to deal with the slow walking in the massive swamp. He takes on Master Barf and beats him with ease with one of the MBRs he just got, getting Pooh back and moving on to Winters. Skate grabs some of the skip sandwiches at the Winter store and heads all the way back to Anonuts' lab, where Apple Kid's mouse gives him the eraser to allow access to the Starman base. Starman base contains some very strong enemies for the player's level, narrow corridors, and high spawn rates, making it one of the hardest dungeons for runners to do fast. After a long trek through the base, Skate battles Starman Deluxe, a strong boss with a PSI shield and the ability to use Starstorm and call for help. He takes him down quickly with the multi-bottle rocket and gets out of there using an exit mouse. After a quick heal in Saturn Valley, Skate gets another exit mouse and grabs the Shyness book from the Onet library. He goes back to Tenda Village at the end of Deep Darkness and uses the Shyness book to open up Lumine Hall and get another bag of Dragonite. Skate goes through Lumine Hall, dealing with large packs of strong enemies on the way. And at the end, he gets the Rabbit's Foot, the best item in the speedrun for Jeff. The Rabbit's Foot gives the equipped character 40 speed, which is incredible for Jeff's bottle rockets, ensuring that more of them hit when used. Skate takes on the Electro Spectre, making quick work of him using the MBRs in his inventory, and grabs the sound from Lumine Hall, making it his fourth he's obtained so far and leaving 4 to clean up. Dropping into the Lost Underworld, he grabs the sea pendant from the top of the map for freeze, fire, and flash resistance and heads down to Fire Springs. Fire Springs has tough enemies like the Psychic Psycho and the Evil Elemental, which can leave you possessed by a ghost and low on health, so Skate needs to try to get green scrolls on enemies or despawn them when possible to have the best chance at surviving. The boss of this area is an anomaly among all of the Sanctuary bosses, because it's actually 2 bosses in one. Meet Carbon Dog, and his stronger form, Diamond Dog. While Carbon Dog isn't really a threat thanks to the combination of the Rabbit's Foot and MBRs, Diamond Dog is still a problem. With a slew of possible status effects and a physical shield, this battle can go wrong in an instant. Luckily, Skate is able to make quick work of this boss and grab the next sound from the Fire Spring. Using the exit mouse to escape, Skate does a few teleports to get some more skip sandwiches and another exit mouse, and then heads off to Forest Side for the next Sanctuary. Going through the required cutscenes, he gets the side banana and gets access to the sewers. This area is like the Deep Darkness swamp, but since the player can't teleport inside of a dungeon, slowly walking through the sludge is the only option. At the end lies the boss called Plague Rat. Normally this boss would be a problem with absurd chances at critical hits and poisoning, but Skate one-shots him with an MBR. Grabbing the carrot key and the sound from Magnet Hill, Skate exit mouses out and heads to Dalam to take on Pink Cloud. Pink Cloud has many actively moving enemies, tight corridors, and even wrong holes that a runner can fall down, losing tons of time. The boss of this place is Thunder and Storm. Jeff can one-shot him with an MBR just like the others in the Sanctuary rush. Skate collects the Pink Cloud sound and escapes from the dungeon, teleporting to Saturn Valley and finally taking on the Milky Well dungeon. These enemies can inflict many status effects that are devastating in the early game. This is why the dungeon is saved for last. Reaching the end, Skate fights Trillionich Sprout, who would normally be a problem due to his ability to diamondize members of the party, but Skate just uses another MBR to one-shot him. After collecting the sound from Milky Well, Ness has another fever dream and ends up in Magicant. Magicant has many narrow pathways and fast enemies that can waste a lot of time. Skate equips the Rabbit's Foot and uses skip sandwiches to try to avoid enemies as much as he can. Getting to the end of Magicant, he ends up at the Sea of Eden and ready to fight Ness's nightmare. The sea is filled with 3 krakens drifting around randomly and can lose a runner a lot of time if encountered. Skate makes it through the area and finally fights Ness's nightmare. This boss goes through a possible rotation of attacks, starting with Rock and Alpha, and a 50% chance after that to start a script where he uses Life Up Beta and Rock and Omega. Skate Man barely slips through this fight, and gets a massive stat boost from the post-fight sequence. Ness finally wakes up, and Skate Man can go back to Onett to grab a piece of the meteorite from the beginning of the game. This is required to power the phase distorter that was made in Saturn Valley. Warping to the cliff that time forgot, Skate does final preparations to head into the Cave of the Past. This final area of the game has many strong enemies that can cause massive time loss. The only way to handle them is to use skip sandwiches and to try to get green swirls on the overworld sprites. Getting to the end and finally encountering Pokey and Gygus, one of the game's hardest battles ensues. Phase 1 of Gygus is the most dangerous encounter in the game. Every turn, Gygus uses Rockin' Alpha or Rockin' Beta, and is completely random as to what he will use. Pokey alternates between decreasing offense and charging forward. Also, Gygus reflects any damage done to him, so Skate can't use any AoE attacks. Here, Skate has to hope that Gygus will use Rockin' Alpha, which hits for much lower damage than the Beta, so Paula can survive and use PSI Shield Sigma to block PSI attacks for the entire party for 3 turns. Ness also needs to paralyze Pokey with Paralysis Alpha, which has a chance to fail. Not only that, but in an optimal fight, Jeff needs to hit at least over 1000 damage on one of his multi-bottle rockets to defeat Phase 1 in 2 turns. Skate luckily makes it past Phase 1 and into the second phase. Here, Gygus can do attacks that are the equivalent of Flash Beta, Freeze Beta, and Thunder Beta. The Freeze ability has a 25% chance to solidify. He can also skip a turn randomly, which is the best possible outcome out of any of the actions he can take. It's important to note that before the fight, Skate put a C pendant and Franklin badge on Paula. This makes her immune to most of Gygus' attacks, and the ones that do hit, do less than 10 damage each time. For the offensive strategy in this phase, MBRs can't be used since Gygus' speed is so high, so Super Bombs and PSI abilities are the way to go here. After Phase 2 is defeated, all Skate needs to do is keep Paula's hit points high and use the Pray command to finish up the fight. With all these strategies in this run, Skate lands a 5:17:41 in today's timing method. Back then, time was done on the last hit on Gygus. Now it's done at the start of the last prayer. For 2012, this time was great, especially since not many others were grinding this category at the time. Skate's gameplay wasn't the best in this run though, with a few unintentional deaths and some inventory mistakes that cost him minutes in different parts of the run. As you also may have noticed, the amount of time needed to dedicate to a run is much more than the usual platformer. And if you lose a run in the middle of the game, starting over a 5-hour run is very brutal. However, this didn't stop another runner from taking on Skate Man, and his name was Oxwus. Oxwus, or known as Lolly Ilya today, runs a variety of games in real time and has done tool-assisted speedruns for others. He got a 5:15:34 on January 4th, 2013, just a few weeks after Skate Man's record. This video no longer exists since it wasn't highlighted, but Skate Man wasn't going to take that sitting down, so he went to work.
Yeah, 4:15:33. Yes. Oh my god.
Skate Man had achieved the first sub 5-hour glitchless run after a month of grinding, in a race. What we didn't see before this is that Skate Man had pushed his times down throughout that month, reaching a 5:02:56. Many of these improvements came from better decision making, new minor strategies, and just better luck. One of these strategies is called stutter stepping. Basically, enemies in the game either have active or reactive movement. Active meaning they move regardless of what the player is doing, and reactive meaning they only move when the player moves. Skate Man and Lolly Ilya found out if you start and stop your character movement within 4 frames, the game doesn't detect the player as moving while in range of certain enemies. This was very useful for avoiding unwanted encounters and worked hand in hand with despawning enemies. Despawning works by scrolling the screen and unloading the enemies, then moving back to hopefully avoid a fight. The despawn distance varies, with horizontal despawning needing half a screen distance and vertical needing a 2/3 screen distance to work. Skate still has some major mistakes in his run, including completing a teleport out of South Scaraba that cost him about 8 minutes. But this run was so huge at the time, it was even mentioned in one of speedrunning's classic podcasts, the Sunday Sequence Break.
Minutes quicker than the world record. He got it in a race just now. Is that up on the screen or not? It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a 4:58:33 SNES, any percent English glitchless. So none of the cool glitches, all of the regular gameplay stuff. So
That's a crazy time, by the way.
However, Lolly Ilya would come back not even 2 weeks later with this run. That's right, a 4:54:37, 3-minute improvement in the back and forth between Skateman and Lolly Ilya. However, this would be the last world record improvement from either of them, since they were running other games besides EarthBound as well. Lolly Ilya's record would stand for quite some time, since the battle for Sub 5 was the major push for the game in 2012 and 2013. Though, someone else would come to the glitchless scene, and surprisingly he wasn't a new face. As a matter of fact, he had been in the SDA community for 5 years prior to his glitchless debut. This is SDFG, and he's an EarthBound legend. SDFG worked on segmented no major skips runs rather than glitchless, improving upon strategies that were already established by Evil Ninja, Mickey Mage, and others. He posted his segmented no major skips updates as early as 2008, and to everyone's surprise, it was accepted to SDA, a segmented 4-hour and 13-minute run in 2008. Now mind you, this run contained a trick that was called cliff skipping, which basically allowed nests to walk through certain walls. Now even though this didn't count as a glitchless run, this set a great baseline for what SDFG would do down the line. And on August 29, 2013, he did something that no one expected. He made a completely new route for the glitchless category. Basically, the new route moved the second sanctuary, Mondimal, to the end of the game as part of the cleanup, saving time from not grinding on enemies in a long boss fight. Not only that, but there were many other shopping optimizations that removed the need for a lot of equipment previously purchased. The chickens were no longer required for the extra money as a result. This also includes removing the bike from the route since it takes so long to get, and it can only be used when one character is in the party. Another thing that he ended up doing to save time was changing the character names to just one alphanumerical character each. This doesn't seem big, but with about 5 hours of gameplay and many text boxes with character names in them, it all adds up fast. This run would finish with a time of 4:51:07, and the best part about it? SDFG lost over 11 minutes through taking a game over instead of finding a healing item nearby, and had to exit some dungeons to heal and re-enter, wasting at least several minutes every time that this would happen. This meant that SDFG was onto something huge, and he wasn't done yet. In a month and a half, SDFG brought the record down a whole 30 minutes to achieve a 4:24:52, more than anyone thought possible at the time. And there was also the issue of many parts of EarthBound glitchless having huge swings in RNG overall compared to previous runs. New strategies from other runners like Popham helped a lot, with cutting down more of the shopping and taking top onet times down to 26 minutes. SDFG was experienced enough at this point to handle adverse situations, and that pushed his time down even further. SDFG had a goal, to take on his segmented SDA time with a single segment glitchless run. That's right, a 4:13 glitchless run. Was it possible? He had done so much to change the run through his efforts. But as everyone knows, competition breeds innovation. This is Andy Perfect, a Diablo streamer with some high-level gameplay under his belt. And he's looking for a new experience from the games that he enjoyed as a kid. And in April 2013, he finds that in the EarthBound speedrunning scene. It didn't take him long to learn the route and start bringing down his time by practicing big sections of the game, with Andy getting his first sub 5 in October 2013. Not too long after that, he started racing with the best of the best not only for the fun of it, but to improve his skills, and that's exactly what he did. Andy Perfect was doing a glitchless race with SDFG and Popham on November 12, 2013. Andy's personal best had come down to a 428, so he was now a contender for winning one of these. SDFG and Popham would forfeit before finishing out, but Andy would keep going despite his time loss early on. He just kept gaining more and more time. Was he going to do more than just PB? A 4:24.41, beating the previous record by 9 seconds. Andy had some things go worse. He belched his base in Magic Hand. But other parts of the run, including Gygas, brought him just enough ahead to snag the record. He knew these sections were holding him back from a better time, so over the next few days, he set off to improve it. And it wouldn't take him long either, because 4 days later, he would push the barrier once more.
Solidify Paula. Good. Bam. 4:19.14 is the new world record.
Andy Perfect had broken the next 10-minute barrier, getting a 4:19.14. Andy had underestimated the amount of time there was left to save in the run, improving upon places like Dungeon Man and most of his endgame. In a matter of 4 days, Andy Perfect had lowered his best time by over 9 minutes, and from here on in, it seemed like it was going to be more difficult for anyone to save over 5 minutes at a time. Regardless, SDFG was not going to take this sitting down. He wanted to be the first to surpass his segmented no major skips run, to once again go beyond anyone's expectations. In a 2-month-long push to bring the time down, SDFG would close out 2013 on top, and surpass his goal in the beginning of 2014. 4:12.10 was his time after the slew of 3 world records in a row. In this run, SDFG had a 27-minute Onet, and many parts of the run went pretty well for him. Department Store didn't have a lot of enemies on the top floor. Starman Base and Loom Mine Hall were pretty clean themselves, but there were still quite a few sections he lost time on. Several bosses took out at least one party member in battle, and areas like Threed, Dungeon Man, and Milky Well gave him a lot of problems. Still, this was good enough to stand for almost 6 months, a feat that hasn't happened in over a year since Skateman had the record. Andy was slowly improving his time in glitchless, but also routing and running any percent glitch at the same time. However, after months of pushing any percent, one day Andy would fire up some glitchless runs to relax a little. This run would be over a minute behind over halfway through the game, but Andy felt his luck turning around, and if anyone can make a comeback, it would be him. Or 11:25. Andy had brought it back and took the world record again, and he had this to say.
I held the world record for about 3 weeks at one point, and then SDFG took it back, and I have finally taken it back for good. Watch SDFG come back. Secretly, he's been grinding attempts off stream, and he's just waiting for me to post a new world record. He's like, oh, by the way, I just got a 408. I'm just kidding about taking it back for good.
He was just kidding, of course, but for another 6 months, glitchless was pretty quiet at the top level. Andy had moved on to doing more any percent, and other community runners were not quite up to the point of pushing this down. Regardless, many community members were having fun scheduling races and honing their skills with knowledge of the more recent route improvements. SDFG was still active up until October 2014 with races, but then he vanished. And it didn't seem like anything was going to top Andy's world record at that point. Some people even thought it would take a complete reroute to push the times down even further, but as it turned out, no one was prepared for what happened next. SDFG didn't just beat the 411, he absolutely destroyed it, out of nowhere. Andy Perfect was almost right in his joking prediction of a 408, but he never expected it to actually become reality. So how did SDFG do it? Welcome to the era of RNG manipulation. RNG manip in EarthBound involves 3 values. We'll refer to them as RNG1, RNG2, and RNG3. RNG1 and 2 are influenced by several things: NPC movement, cursor inputs in the menu and in battle, opening the B menu, and even each character of text printed on screen. RNG3 is updated in reference with RNG1 and 2 via certain trigger points. These are invisible 64 by 64 pixel squares everywhere in the game, and when you cross into another square, RNG3 updates. You can also update RNG3 by touching certain walls and objects as well. RNG manip is actually set up when you power on the console. The values are always the same going into the file menu, and runners can select their options, reset, and there's a cursor memory for the options you chose. From there, runners would do 20 cursor movements with 1 alphanumeric character each and start the game on manip every time. With this knowledge, you can manipulate encounters, damage rolls and smashes, and most importantly, that's right, you can also manipulate item drops from enemies. This was huge since it cut out all the grinding and giant step, and it let you defeat Titanic Ant in 2 turns with bombs. Not just that, but it was carried all the way to the end of ONET after the cops fight. This took top ONET times down to just over 19 minutes, saving a massive amount of time over not doing the manipulation. However, there was a huge problem with doing the manip. If you messed it up at all, you could throw off RNG and would have to reset and try again. Since glitchless doesn't allow console resets, runners can't reset RNG mid-run. This meant that the top level of EarthBound speedrunning would have an even bigger barrier to entry to contest the record. 19 minutes of perfect play was tall order. As for Andy Perfect though, that didn't even faze him. With doing the RNG manip, getting better encounter luck in some of the main dungeons, and dropping more safeties, Andy was taking the category to new heights with the world record beating the previous by over 3 minutes. Over 6 minutes were saved with the manip, and throughout his run, Andy would have his pace fluctuate to almost a 10-minute lead, and back down to 7 near the end. He was starting to realize with all these improvements to the route and his ability to make run-saving decisions on the fly, that maybe the 4-hour barrier could be broken. At this point, SDFG had decided to take a step back from speedrunning, so it was up to Andy to get the perfect run. And on March 31st, 2015, he wouldn't disappoint.
There you go. Oh my gosh, this run.
3:57:35. The 4-hour barrier shattered. This was a run that was 9 years in the making, starting from when Evil Ninja was working on a segmented run in the SDA forums. Andy had a faster ONET with less hesitation on inputs. He gained a lot of time from good RNG in Happy Happy Village. He lost some time going into Winters, but it wasn't much at all. He didn't get any of the encounter skips in the Brick Road dungeon, so he bled time from that and some of the Threed segment. His Belch's base was pretty good, nabbing him another minute of time save. But Mole Cave ended up being an equalizer there due to a bunch of despawns and unfortunate encounters. Andy gets a decent encounter at the top floor department store and beats the spook rather quickly. The rest of the mid-game was pretty decent, but he started to fall off during Pyramid thanks to some bad encounters. The real-time save really picked up when he saved 35 seconds in Starman base thanks to some good decision making. And after that, he basically walked through Lumine Hall. He got only 2 encounters and they were Foppies, which are easily defeated in one turn. The Sanctuary cleanup went well, nabbing him another minute from decent encounters. He got less than optimal luck in Magic Hand, more than made it up with the perfect Ness's Nightmare battle. He didn't stop there though. He had a lot of time to save in grabbing the meteorite from Dark Onet, and Andy was able to snag another minute and a half from that segment. His Cave of the Past was less than optimal, having quite a few bad encounters, but his Gygas fight was incredibly fast in Phase 1 and 2. With all these things combined, Andy had done the seemingly impossible by breaking another hour barrier. This would be the first time the record would remain the same for more than 6 months since 2012. However, 9 months later, after a couple hundred more attempts, Andy would defy his expectations yet again.
Baby!
With a time of 3:54.11. The main time save came from basically cleaning up some sections that were worse off than others. But for most of the run, Andy Perfect wasn't really ahead of his personal best. In fact, an excellent Pyramid at even Starman base carried the later half of the run. He knew very well that this could be improved, but he wouldn't be the one to do it. It wouldn't actually be anyone we mentioned so far. So who could have taken the record? Remember when I said that EarthBound had an active community of people who race almost weekly? For months, the community of runners had been growing to an astounding number, and they would race glitchless without using manipulation almost every week. Runners such as Phalix1 and Daniel RGT obtained their very own sub 4 times not too far behind Andy Perfect. Daniel had started running glitchless in August of 2015, and pushed himself to the top level of play in just 5 months of running the category. Andy's PB was incredibly far ahead for its time, and the luck required to push it down would be staggering for any runner willing to take that on. For Daniel though, he had a secret weapon. His experience with fighting games and having to make quick decisions within a moment's notice would aid him in being a force that EarthBound speedrunning had never seen before.
Oh, we got it again. And that is a new ONET world record by 6 seconds.
Daniel used his skills to be the first person to take the record away from Andy in over a year, beating him by 22 seconds. With time saves becoming less and less in the run, this record should follow the flow of standing for a long time before someone beats it. The new norm was for the glitchless record to be untouched for months, but in this case, how about a week?
Not a sub 352. Oh well. record, 3:52:13.
In just 1 week of attempts, he took the record back by over a minute and a half. There were still a lot of mistakes in the early game, but Andy brought it back in the middle game so much that even though he lost time through much of the end game, he still pulled ahead at the end. Andy had multiple points during the run that were close to sub 350 pace, and many people thought he would actually go for it. However, this would be the last time that Andy Perfect would hold the glitchless record, and it would only stand for a few months until another sub 4 runner and community racer would take the record. Background Guy 02 got his first sub 4 in January of 2016 and had been working on his glitchless time since late 2015. He was already a top contender, beating Daniel's best time shortly after Andy had beat it himself. On July 4th of 2016, when everyone was celebrating with friends and fireworks, Background Guy ended up having his own reason to celebrate.
Oh my fucking god!
With getting much better luck in some areas than Andy, Background Guy pulls through by 23 seconds. He was actually ahead for the entire run after Onet, but he lost over a minute thanks to some bad spawns in Mole Cave. Another minute and a half in Milky Well also due to horrible spawn luck, and even almost losing the run in Magic Ant thanks to bad encounters and a sketchy Ness's Nightmare fight. There were also multiple points where he was on sub 350 pace, but EarthBound's monstrous RNG robs another runner from breaking that barrier. Many other runners in the community were pushing their times down along with Background Guy. Runners like Valks and Temple were well under sub 4 with their PBs, but more than several minutes away from the record at this point. Though there is another sub 4 runner we haven't talked about yet, and this guy actually got his first sub 4 while in the practice room at RPG Limit Break in 2016, a well-known charity speedrunning marathon. He even had experience with high-level competitive play in an RTS game called Age of Empires when he was younger, being one of the best players in the world. Ultimo Ice had arrived, and he got good at the game fast. Something that most top runners knew at the time was how to take care of menus and spawns quickly outside of battle. The menus were self-explanatory for the most part. The despawning was a little bit more nuanced, and Ultimo Ice was one of the first to give voice to that. Thanks to him and some other runners who looked into the assembly code for the game, he whittled down the distance needed to despawn enemies, especially for those enemies that actively move. These enemies were still moving, and they could even despawn themselves off screen. Not only that, but when sprites load into the game, there's a certain amount of lag that happens. If you catch that lag early enough, you can back up without the enemy even showing up on screen, optimally despawning and wasting less time pushing forward. Using these strategies, Ulti would land himself just ahead of Background Guy's run by 50 seconds. He didn't get a lot of great luck at the beginning of his glitchless run. His Happy segment was good, but he lost a lot of time in Winters due to not being able to avoid the brick road enemies. His Grapefruit Falls and Belch's base were riddled with bad spawns as well. He recovered a lot of time in Mole Cave and Department Store, skipping the top floor spawn and having a decent spook fight. Unfortunately, Ulti would lose about 2 minutes over the course of the next half hour or so. The bad luck streak wouldn't last long, as one of the hardest segments in the game, Starman Base, would give him a nice break for once, with him golding the split thanks to only having to take a total of 3 fights in the base. Ulti had a good sanctuary cleanup, and when he got to Magic Ant, he started playing out of his mind. His entire stint in Magic Ant only took a little over 3 minutes, which is an absolutely fast time for such a dangerous place. His endgame would go over pretty well, grabbing him a little more time from an average Cave of the Past and Gyga's fight. Ulti had a goal: to get the first ever sub 350 and destroy the category. However, he would take a detour with some other games like Illusion of Gaia and Robotrek first. Up until this point in EarthBound Glitchless, when someone gets the record and leaves the category for a while, they typically don't come back to it. In this case, Daniel RGT took the any percent glitch category record in October 2016, and he had his sights on taking all of the main category records at the time, so Glitchless was his next target. Less than 3 weeks into his grind, he'd get a run pretty deep into the mid game that was mostly behind, and he had a lot of great splits, but when RNG was bad, it was really bad. Daniel had taken a run that was deep into the red and turned it into a world record. A 350.18, 19 seconds off of the sub 350. So would Daniel go for the first sub 350? Actually, no. Daniel would move on to the photo percent category to get the hat trick of all the main categories at the time, but wouldn't come back to glitchless for the sub 350. So the glitchless record will remain untouched for just about 4 months. Another top runner, Alex1, had been running glitchless since 2014, alongside the other greats such as Andy Perfect, Temple, and SDFG, but had never attained a world record before. He would always barely miss the times due to either someone taking down the time first, or something unfortunate occurring at the end of the run. On February 17, 2017, Alex was on a run that would destroy the current record, and his opportunity to escape the curse was there.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh, I knew it! Oh! Oh my god! Oh!
Alex was devastated once again, barely missing the record by just a few seconds. And as it turned out, he wouldn't be the one to take the record either. Remember what I said about Ultimo Ice? How he started working on other games? He was back and raring to push his time down. All he needed was a little over a minute, and on March 1st of 2017, he was 44 seconds ahead of his PB going to Cave of the Past.
Fucking hell. Thank you. Thank God.
There it was, a 349, but not just any 349, but one that was closer to the next minute mark than the previous minute. He was the first person to do it. However, he wouldn't be the last, and surprisingly, his record didn't even last for 3 weeks. Out of all the world record contenders that were working to push the game, there was one who would finally pull through.
Always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Took me just under 3 years to beat Andy, my mentor in this. I finally did it a few weeks ago. 3 years of getting close, getting super close, and having to solidify. Being super far ahead, getting the beta, and not being able to recover from it. 6 times I get a PB to beat an old world record, like a day after someone just floored it. And now, after exactly 3 years, today I am the bride.
Finally, on March 18, 2017, he sealed the deal and brought it home. After years of attempts of being behind the record, Alex would come out on top, and no one was going to take this away from him. And of course, Ultimo Ice wasn't going to take this sitting down. Ultimo Ice immediately came back to EarthBound glitchless to do attempts, knowing he could push the record down further. Ultimo Ice got a run that was on strong pace early on, and his intentions were clear. He didn't want to just beat the record, he wanted to shatter it.
solid. Here it comes. What do we got? Uh-oh. Oh my god! Yes! Oh my word! Yes, we lost it on the blaster and solidify. Nice. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's awesome. I split a second late. I don't think I got it because that last turn solidified. I got it? Are you kidding me right now? I even split a second late, but like, what? Are you kidding me?
A solidify that almost stole it all from Ultimate Ice just like it did for Phalix. But in Ulti's case, he was able to just pull ahead. A world record by 2 seconds. While this run didn't hit the goal that Ultimate Ice was looking for, he was satisfied with the fact that he got the record. Ulti would then go on to run EarthBound Glitchless at SGDQ 2017, showcasing the run to hundreds of thousands of viewers around the world. This would bring some new runners to the scene, and some others out of their lurk. One of these runners was Toodler 5 and he was going to change the EarthBound scene forever. As we already know, after Onet, RNG Manip isn't carried anymore, and runners are subjected to the horrors of Peaceful Rest Valley and Happy Happy, where enemy encounters are sudden and dangerous. The only reason that Tucson and Onward wasn't manipulated was due to the sheer number of NPCs moving around in the city. 1 or 2 NPCs advancing RNG is difficult enough to handle. Now imagine adding a couple more to that, and you have a manipulation nightmare. Well, at least that's what we thought. It turned out that veteran runner Aurelix had a Tucson manipulation mostly routed out and ready to go sometime in 2015, all the way up to the pencil eraser. But there was a gentleman's agreement amongst the top runners to stop the routing of the manipulation. This was because they wanted to foster activity within the community at the top level, and not create a higher barrier to entry for high-level runs. The Onet manipulation being implemented into the run had previously made other old runners quit the game because of its difficulty, and they believed that history would repeat itself if more manip were allowed. This wasn't an actual rule though, so if someone else were to come along and route the manip, then there was nothing they could do to stop them. In September 2017, Toodler revealed his route, and while it wasn't perfect, it did something that no one would have ever thought possible. He made it to where not only everything in Tucson and Happy Happy was manipulated, but he made it to Mondable and defeated him. This was a massive change to the route. Not only was there massive time save from having no RNG in any of the required fights in Happy Happy, such as the Shack fight and the Car Painter fight, but it took out the requirement for Paralysis Alpha for Mondable and threw it out the window. This removes a trip to Onet for the exit mouse, a teleport back to Tucson to use several skip sandwiches for running to Happy Happy, and a teleport out of Happy Happy after defeating Mondable. Doing Mondable with Manip would save an additional 3 minutes or so, and it would make the death warp back to Tucson fast and consistent. Not only that, but in the middle of the manipulation, the route grabs a couple life noodles to revive Paula at the bus station instead of walking back up to the hospital. Unfortunately, inputs were in odd places, and the route wasn't that consistent in a real-time setting, so another top-level runner, Erythium 1, started revising and refining the route, making it easier to carry the manipulation through the end of the gauntlet. There were mixed reactions from the community, but overall the message was clear. The limits of EarthBound Glitchless were going to be pushed yet again, and it wouldn't be by Toodler since he didn't do much running of this game. The push would come from a couple runners who were both masters in their craft, one in any percent, and another one in photo percent. The any percent runner, Sarium, was an avid EarthBound watcher since mid-2016, but didn't do any practice runs until later that year. Do you remember how Ulti had help with reading assembly and picking apart various aspects of the game? That was Sarium's doing. Sarium had already been doing glitchless runs since February of 2017, but didn't focus solely on the category until that May. Over the next 4 months, he had brought down his personal best to a 353 already. So how was he going to do with the new manipulation?
Oh my god, I split late. Holy shit, it's world record.
Sarium's first glitchless world record by 3 seconds. And little did he know, this was only scratching the surface of what this route could do. Sarium would keep doing attempts, knowing that there would be more time save available to him if he just kept grinding. And that's what he did. Actually, it wouldn't take him that long for him to push down the time. Just a week later, he had another great run that was on pace.
Ooh, that's a good one. That is a good one.
3:45.18. The new route really showed how much more there is to save in the category, with Sarium being ahead by almost 5 minutes by the time he fought Kraken in the big game. Things became quiet for about a month in terms of new records, but runners kept trying to push their times down, including the mystery photo percent world record holder we mentioned earlier. His name was Classic James. James had already gotten the 351 without Tusamanip in the middle of 2017, so he was already positioned to compete at the top level. He wouldn't grind out the category until later that year though, as James enjoyed switching categories often and would take on a new challenge after a new PB or two. With the Tusamanip being dropped, that got Classic James interested in taking on the category again. On December 3rd, he would have a run that ended up on world record pace going into Gygas, and he would be in it for the long haul.
Oh, this rockin'. This is bad. Kill people. Solidify. I don't think so. I don't think it can happen. I don't think it can happen. God, this is so close. Oh my god. Wasn't meant to be. Was not meant to be, guys. But big PB. Was not meant to be. Big PB. 4 solidifies in a row. The game clearly doesn't want me to get it. But big PB.
4 solidifies in a row, crushing any chance of beating Sarium's time. He would finish the run strong with the 3:45.32, just 14 seconds off of the record. 10 days later though, he would get another chance at taking down the top time.
Oh! Who does that? Who doesn't split on the flats?
Classic James gets his first glitchless world record with a time of 3:44.30. It wouldn't stop there though, because the 2 titans of EarthBound glitchless would keep at attempts in the upcoming weeks.
They sort of bit pink. I might have split slightly early. I don't know. It might have been like right on time. There it is, man. Oh man, big sigh of relief. I only lost 11.5 seconds. Yo, what's up, James?
Oh my god, guys. What a run. What a run.
James's record he got on the 21st would stand for a couple months. But then Sarium would come back to stake his claim at the top once again.
Did it. I did it. It's over. It's over.
This record was pretty strong and would stand for quite some time. His run had a pretty rough early game. His third strongest mole cave time ended up being a high 126, which is a bit slower than what he wanted, but not too far behind. He started to gain some time back until some mishaps occurred with the Kraken split before Scaraba. His Dungeon Man split was very strong, putting him almost a minute and 30 seconds ahead of his 342. He was able to maintain most of that time save until Lumine Hall. He took a couple of time-consuming Fabi encounters in the last room, bringing him back down to about even with his previous PB. Fire Springs didn't go the best for Sarium, but he was able to pull through and save a minute there. The rest of his cleanup left him almost 3 minutes ahead, but he needed the time buffer for the end of the game due to his Cave of the Past and Gygas fight being a gold split. At the end of it all, Sarium would close it out with a 341.50. For the last couple of records up until now, there was a ton of time save to be had from the new route. But as the record improved, more and more time save was pushed to getting lucky in most areas. Not having many spawns and getting first turn runaways when you had to take a fight. The ability to push the game further was there, but like it was with Ultimo Ice's record, it really just came down to chance. Of course, that wasn't going to stop people from doing attempts to beat the time, including other runners like Uko, Erythium1, and me. I started learning EarthBound glitchless in January 2016, with only having previous experience of running Mega Man 1 glitchless. I lowered my personal best to a 352 by September of 2017, and took a break after failing to consistently complete the monomal manip. After several months of running other games, I came back to the category and gave it another try. With the help of Erythium1 and Sarium, I was able to complete the monomal manip with a good level of consistency, and started grinding the category for about 8 months straight. Erythium1 and Ultimo Ice also made a big push to update the manip route during this grind, which helped save a decent chunk of time. This included a save in the Onet Hotel, and a death warp after the Titanic Ant fight. Not only that, but there were changes that made the twosome part of the manip more consistent in general. These changes, and getting more experience that reacted to many different situations in the category, I was able to use all of these things to get this run.
The turn skip! The fucking turn skip! Please, give me more, give me more, give me more. One more, please. Oh my god, what is this? Oh my god, what was it? No fucking way. Oh, so close. Oh my god, it was so close.
341.53. I had missed the record by 3 seconds, mainly thanks to a Kraken in the Sea of Eden who wouldn't move out of the way for about 30 seconds. However, this wouldn't be my only chance at bringing down my time. On November 28th, 2018, the opportunity would present itself once more.
Come on, let's bring it home. Let's bring it home. Oh my god! Oh my god! What the fuck?
A 341.13. After 8 months straight of grinding glitchless, I had taken the world record for the first time. This run didn't pull ahead by a large margin until after the pyramid split, but even after that, time loss and time saves would even the pace, at least until near the end during the meteorite split. After getting so close, the next goal should become clear. 340 was possible, and I wasn't going to stop until I achieved that time. And on January 20th, 2019, a glitchless run would happen that no one saw coming.
1 second, baby. Sub 340.
Daniel RGT would swoop in with the first ever sub 340 by 1 second. Daniel had actually improved his PB in the last few months before this with the Monomal manip. He was doing glitchless attempts to push his time down. The record was very strong, but unfortunately for Daniel, it wouldn't last that long, because 10 days later, this would happen.
Come on. Come on. Give it to me. There it is! There it is! What did I get? What did I get? Yes! Yes! Yes!
I had attained my very own sub 340 and improved the record by 31 seconds. About 3 months after that, the record would come down again to a 3:38:38. This run was on an incredible pace in the endgame, being about 3 minutes ahead at one point, but Gygas brought the run back down to earth, with the Cave of the Past that didn't really cooperate, and the final fight taking a toll on the lead as well. I would grind the category a little bit longer to push the time down, but one top runner would make their return to EarthBound in a spectacular way.
World record, dude. Oh my god.
On May 7, 2019, Sarium had come back to push his times down once again and succeed. He took the record with his very own 3:38. However, this was not the last record that would be attained that year.
Come on. No. Yes! 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 I got it! Yes!
November 17, 2019, I attained a 3:38:08. Coming from a late game that was behind, the final split was nearly perfect, closing it out just 6 seconds ahead of my previous top time. And that's where the record stands today. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out. Also, please check the description and the pinned comment for mentioned runners and other credits. And a special thank you to the Patreons who support the channel.